Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Into the Afroverse. I'm your host, William Jones, and Into the Afroverse is where we're taking Black folks into the future. You know, on Into the Afroverse, we are bringing you the best, the brightest folks when it comes to creativity, when it comes to writing, when it comes to intellectual thought. And today's guest is one of those greats that I'm talking about. And this person, she's wearing many hats. So want to bring to Into the Afroverse, N.D. Jones. N.D. Jones is a USA Today best-selling author. And one of the things she wants to do is she wants to see more novels with positive, sexy, and three-dimensional Black characters as soulmates, friends, and lovers. So she actually took that challenge on herself. And along with a fantasy romance series, Forever Yours, and a contemporary romance trilogy, The Styles of Love, she has authored 3 paranormal romance series. So we're getting, I guess you could say like the real world romance stories, and we're also getting these paranormal romance stories. Winged Warriors, Death and Dynasty, and Dragon, Shift the Romance, and an urban fantasy duology, Feline Nation. ND has also created fantasy in the adult coloring book series. And in this series, she actually has it where Black men and women are being represented as fairies, angels, mermaids, and other fantastical creatures. And not only does she deal with areas in terms of romance, paranormal, and so forth, she also has a background in education. And through that, she brought about 2 books, a resilience series, one for Black women and one for Black men. The first one is called The Color of My Resilience, a guided self-care journal for Black men, and The Color of My Resilience, a guided self-care journal for Black women. And she is also the founder of Kuumba Publishing. Is this woman wearing a lot of hats or what? Okay. It's an art and audiobook, ebook, and paperback company that is a forum for creativity with a special commitment to promoting and encouraging creative works from authors and artists of African descent. And without further ado, allow me to introduce to you Ms. N.D. Jones. How you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you very much for having me here. It's definitely an honor, and I appreciate the invitation.
No, thank you. Thank you for blessing us with your presence. I just want to start off, when I was reading off all of these things and folks out there that may be familiar with your work or not familiar with your work, and you're just being introduced to them, they're being introduced to you. Uh, what was it that kind of guided you to these areas that you decided to tackle? Romance, para-romance, and also these books on resilience. Like, walk us through how you get from one stage to the next.
So I know a while back we had a conversation, and I often share the story of how I came to be a comic book reader.
Mhm.
And I was basically ushered in to that fandom through the writings of Reginald Hudlin as the author of Black Panther. And I was intrigued when I found out that Storm and Black Panther would be paired as a couple, would become both king and queen of Wakanda. And I was drawn to that. And I think in the same way that other African Americans are drawn to media in which we are not given an equal visual and equal access, that we just don't see ourselves enough in not only comics, but just the media in general. So I was very much drawn to that. I love Black love, I love seeing that represented in a powerful way, in a positive way. And so I picked up that comic. And from there, I started actually reading more comics than just the Black Panther comic. But it really just reinforced something that I already knew.
Mhm.
But seeing it in a comic book, seeing it in color, I realized that it was just truly missing. And from there, I eventually wrote fan fiction. I did actually write a little bit of Black Panther and Storm. I wrote a bit of Wonder Woman and Superman. And that was really how I started my writing.
Right.
As you know, and if you really speak to some authors, maybe I wouldn't say necessarily just simply independent authors, but you will probably find quite a few of us went that fan fiction route, or at least enjoy fan fiction. I think you have some amazing authors, but I think it comes from a love of the genre, of certain characters. But in the end, we don't own any of those characters.
Got you. So the fan fiction kind of set the stage for you creating your own characters, and it was like what, like practice for you, and it just kind of evolved into you're saying, "Hey, I got to do my own thing and create my own characters."
Absolutely.
Got you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you're playing with someone else's characters, even if you're creating your own stories. So if you're spending so much time creating someone else's your own stories for other people's characters, you might as well create your own characters and have that time with your own name attached to it, with everything that you own, as opposed to borrowing someone else.
I see. Now, one of the things that I've noticed throughout your work is, and you just kind of mentioned it, it's really centered around Black love and relationships. What is it about this particular topic that was so, it may seem obvious to some, but could you explain what is it about this particular theme of Black love that's so important to you? And why do you feel like it needs to be reflected in your work?
Absolutely. It is very important to me. It's important in the way that, in general, African Americans are represented in the media,
Mhm.
how our family stories aren't fully told, is often told in a very skewed, biased, or stereotypical way. And while we can always find examples of all of the crazy things that we see on television and hear in movies and books or what have you, that doesn't mean that's all of who we are. You have African Americans who are out there doing a lot of positive things, who are loving, who are taking care of their families, who are uplifting themselves, uplifting their communities. And I believe that those are stories that also need to be told, also need to be put in the public domain. And I saw that coming up. Again, we're not talking about perfection here, but we are talking about fully functioning people and fully functioning families. And I said to myself, I can write that. I can do that. I have personal experience with that in my own household. And I believe everyone would like to see themselves represented. So I think that is the lane that I feel very comfortable driving in.
I see. Now, with the way that Black relationships are depicted on, let's say, these so-called reality shows, the way that you see these conversations taking place, on social media platforms where it's very antagonistic between Black men and Black women. Has this proven to be a challenge in terms of getting your story out there, or has this been something to assist you in terms of showing folks, the other side of the coin, so to speak, or has it had no effect on you whatsoever?
It hasn't proven to be a barrier to me getting my stories out there, putting it in the public domain. I do find that those stories, whether I like it or not, those are stories that people, including African Americans, they like to consume.
Mhm.
And I think for me that is part of my struggle, because I don't go that particular route. And I don't want to say that to to demonize or to cast aspersions on shows like that. I don't personally watch them. I have my personal reasons for particularly not caring for them,
Right.
but they are a certain type of consumption that we as African Americans that we enjoy. Now, whether I can argue on both sides whether we should enjoy that, why do we choose to enjoy certain depictions? But that's just a route that I will not take. It isn't anything that I find personally pleasurable to consume. And if I wouldn't consume it myself, I am not in turn going to create that type of situation and scenarios in what I write. But the world is big enough and people's tastes, African Americans' tastes, are broad enough in which they can consume a lot of different types of information.
I see, makes perfect sense. And if you're just joining us, this is Into the Afroverse with William Jones. And today we are joined by USA Today bestselling author, N.D. Jones. And we're talking about Black love in her work. So what has been the response? What's been like the feedback? Are people really embracing this other side, that you're presenting in your work? What has been, some of the I guess feel good stories coming out of you writing these types of books?
Overall, is very positive response. Um, as I said, African Americans or just readers in general, they have a wealth of experience. They have a wealth of knowledge, and when they see that in the stories, I think people tend to appreciate that. I've definitely read reviews in which people have said exactly that. They enjoy fantasy, they enjoy paranormal romance, and if there is a great Black character that's attached to a genre that they enjoy, they are there for that. So overall, the response has been really positive, especially for people who enjoy that very specific genre.
Got you. Now, I know in years past, it's been a challenge for women when they enter into realms of fantasy, science fiction, and so forth. Have you found it to be any type of challenge being a woman, being a Black woman on top of that, in terms of writing this and having folks take it seriously, accepting it? Have there been any challenges at all?
Well, it depends what space you find yourself. And I will give this really quick example. I am in the process of trying to look for a literary agent.
Mhm.
And so my stories and the way that I write them, they're very unapologetically um, Black, but it's not just that. It's the type of social issues that I integrate into my stories. And so what I find and what I've found is that some of these agents, they do not believe that they will be able to sell the book to a bigger publishing company. And
Really?
so I grapple with that. It isn't that they think the writing is bad or even the story is bad, but they're like, I don't know what exactly I can do with this story. I'm not sure. And so if they aren't sure, they don't want to take on something that they don't feel that they can successfully represent. So that leaves me in a particular quandary as far as how will I proceed. I'm going to still write the books that I write, but I think that's a very real issue and concern with certain authors of color when we choose to write certain types of books.
Wow, it's really interesting. Unfortunately, not surprising, but it is interesting that continues to be something that Black creators like yourself are dealing with. But one of the things that I see that you have done is you have founded Kuumba Publishing. Can you give us a little bit of the backstory to how you came to create this company?
Absolutely. I created the company in response to my experience with an established publishing company. I had two of my first novellas through a particular company, and the first book in my Death and Destiny trilogy. So when I received the contract for the second book in the trilogy, I looked at the contract, and the contract really wasn't a good fit. It was the same contract, but I wasn't in the same spot that I was as a new author by the time I received my third contract, and I just did not feel comfortable with the amount of rights that they wanted. And so I asked them simply, what's my flexibility with this? And the editor said, well, send back, maybe some things that you're concerned about, and we'll take a look at it. And I sent back a whole lot. And so they basically released me from my contract, but I still had a book that I wanted to publish, and there were future books I wanted to publish. And since I was in a better place as far as my knowledge and skill level with the industry, I thought that I could probably better represent myself. So that's really the rough origin of publishing. And it's a whole lot when you start to research all the different moving parts of being in a business. But it really was just, I wanted more control and power over my content. And to do that, you have to really do things on your own.
Certainly, I can agree with that. So how can folks find your work? Where can they find you at? How can they contact you? How can they reach you?
Sure. My website is ndjonesparanormalpleasure.com. On most social media, I dare say probably all social media, I am ND Jones author. I am on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. I have a YouTube channel as well. So most social media, I think I'm just new to TikTok as well. So I have a few videos. So yeah, ND Jones author, most platforms, including LinkedIn as well.
Okay. Now, two other things I want to ask you about. One was the coloring book. How did that come about? Because I find that really interesting. An adult coloring book. How did that come about?
You know, I just, I do a lot of self-care, professional development through work. I work for a local Maryland public school system, and self-care, especially during the times of the pandemic, was huge. So I started really looking into this stuff. And again, I love cartoons. I love anime. I love manga, just, action and all that stuff. And so I really thought about that. And it was the same thing with writing. It's like, again, we don't see a lot of that representation. You definitely have coloring books with African Americans, but again, there's still a dearth of those out there. So it's for the same reason why I write what I do, and I really took that visual to heart. And so I hired great illustrators. I mean, I can't draw. I can barely draw a circle. But what I can do is I create every aspect of those characters that someone would see in the book that they picked up. I did not color it, but every part of that I created it. And I turned it over to people who definitely have artistic abilities. And yeah, it's just really meeting what I perceive to be a need. And we like to see ourselves. And like I said, self-care is important, and coloring is just one strategy to address, our well-being, our mental well-being.
Gotcha. Now, the other thing is, you came out with two books, one of which I had the honor of sharing an essay in, the two resilience books.
Yes, you did.
Dealing, yeah, thank you for that. So, that was a great experience for me and an honor for me. So you have two books out, The Color of My Resilience, a guided self-care journal for Black men, and you also have the same thing for Black women. Can you give us like the origin story behind that? What's the motivation behind the creation of those two books?
Sure. And I just mentioned the pandemic and me being an educator. And so in March of 2021, as everyone knows, like things in the country, just as they did around the world, shut down. And our school systems were no different. And so, like I mentioned, I'm a professional developer. So we went home and we were asked to create professional development opportunities for our staff. And I do a lot of research and reading on social, emotional, and cultural intelligence. So I created professional development around those big theories. And as I did so, and I'm reading everything that these teachers are writing, they were under a lot of stress. And mind you, I work for a majority white school system. So that's who's there as far as educators. And I'm looking at their coping mechanisms, everything that they struggle with. And these are people who are, at least most of them, strongly middle class. They have advanced degrees. They have very, they're smart people. They're talented people, but their coping mechanisms was really questionable. And how they thought about emotions and how they were raised to understand emotions and their place. And what it really solidified for me on a level that I hadn't really thought about in a while is just how much more difficult all of that is when you layer it with race, when you
Right.
layer it with other systems of oppression. And I thought to myself, I spend hours and hours creating professional development that is primarily consumed by white middle class educators. I can use that same skill and knowledge to create a resource that really anyone could pick up, because the strategies is not limited to race, but some of the questions I put in there is definitely dealing with race. All of the images are, Black folk, African American people, and definitely the stories of resilience, such as the one that you wrote, come from people who've had that layer of racial oppression heaped upon them in varying degrees of their life. And so, yeah, that's the origin story behind those two journals.
Got you. So once again, if you're just joining us, this is Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones, here on 1450 WOL, where information is power. And you can also join us on WOLDCnews.com. And we're joined today by N.D. Jones, USA Today bestselling author and founder of Kuumba Publishing. So with this book, these books on resilience, uh, what is it you want folks to get from it? So you talk about coping mechanism, recognizing oppressive systems and so forth, and saying, basically we got a whole lot on our backs, we got a whole lot on our shoulders. I get the book, I read the book, I'm buying this for someone else. What is it that you want them to get out of this purchase, out of this experience of reading your book?
Well, I'm going to answer that question, but what I will say, and I did include it in the introduction, is that the book is not, or the books, they are not a replacement for mental health practitioners.
Very
It's
important.
not that at all. I'm not that type of doctor. And so I want people to be really clear that you don't necessarily pick up a book and think that that's the end all that you may need if you need some serious mental health care. So that's one. Primarily, the purpose of the book is really at that self-awareness level. And that's actually huge, because if we cannot own who we are, what we think, how we feel, our experiences, making changes will be really impossible, or having sustainable change will be impossible. So self-awareness is extremely important. So in the book, I created many prompts that will allow a person to take a somewhat of a deep dive into who they are, what they think, what they feel. And then from that, they can become a bit more strategic in deciding how they want to change themselves, or perhaps really realizing there's some things that they are doing extremely well and they should continue to engage in those actions. But in no way is it meant to replace any type of mental health practitioners, because
Excellent.
people need that. And it's really important. And I think, especially in the Black community, we have to get to the point in which we have to realize that it is okay to seek out those individuals. And for some of us, it is a life or death situation if we choose not to.
Excellent. I see your point. Thank you for that. One of the things we always deal with here on Into the Afroverse, one of the themes is looking at Black folks in the future. And my question to you is, where do you see us in the future? And it seems like, your areas are dealing with relationships, mental health, and so forth. Where do you see Black folks in the future as it relates to relationships, mental health, community? And what role do you see yourself playing in kind of bringing that future into existence?
That's a heavy question or questions you posed there. And, depending on where you're looking, it can be kind of bleak, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a lot that needs to be done in what we may label the Black community, whether you live in a predominantly Black community or you are a member of the Black community because you culturally align yourself. I think we have to make a lot of hard decisions as African Americans, as far as individuals, but also collectively. There are things that we definitely need to own about ourselves, and that we need to say, okay, this isn't working. We need to fix this. A
Right.
lot of the answers, some answers is outside of our community. Those are things that we can advocate for, that we can protest about, but those are the things that we have the least control over. But
Right.
there's always a fight that's to be had for those external pressures on us as individuals and on the Black community. That being said, there's also an individual aspect to it as well. And that's the part that we have the most control over. And that's what we have to own. I am a believer that there's always a multifaceted approach to basically everything in life, but specifically any type of social issue. So I would never advocate one specific strategy, one specific avenue, because it's not going to, what you want to achieve is not going to be as widespread as you want it to be. But if every individual person at least takes responsibility for themselves and who's next to them, I think you'll have a lot of growth there.
Excellent. Excellent. And one more time, how can folks reach
Again, Indy Jones author, most places. My website is ndjonesparanormalpleasure.com. If you want to email me, that my email address is info@ndjonesparanormalpleasure.
Excellent. And Andy Jones, I just want to say thank you so much for blessing us with your presence this morning. And I'm sure folks out there listening have gained a lot from it. So you heard it, ladies and gentlemen, Indy Jones. Make sure you go out and support this author and check out Kuumba Publishing and all its works. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with, Indy?
I do. There are two things I would like to add. I have an essay memoir and an ebook. Is entitled The Danger of the White Liberal Educator. It's really the first work outside of the resilience books that I wrote that's really like nonfiction and that deals with the other side of me, which is the educator side.
Mhm.
And I wrote the essay as part of this anthology with other Black sister authors. And so now I've published that as an individual book. So again, it is entitled The Danger of the White Liberal Educator. It's really based on my experience being an African American woman in the education system. I have like over 20 plus years of experience, and that came out at the very beginning of the month. And I am currently working with a narrator. Her name is Ruthie Bowles, and she is narrating that short essay for me. So hopefully I can have that out next month sometime. And then I'm also working with a brother narrator, and he is narrating my book, Of Fear and Faith, which is the first book in my Death and Destiny trilogy. So I have those two audiobooks that will be out before year's end.
Excellent. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Indy Jones. This is Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones, where you can join us every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. here on WOL 1450 AM, 95.9 FM, where information is power. And a special thank you to the team over at Mr. Duke Productions for producing today's episode. Take care and have a great day.